maybe. The service is titled Landback. This is a word that was new to me a year ago, 2 years ago, perhaps. But we've been talking a lot about reparations here in this congregation, and it's a similar idea. And some of the discussions that we have had in this congregation have spoken to whether, what kinds of reparations we feel called to. And in my mind, they take two forms. One is for descendants of enslaved Africans in this country, and the other lens is a Native American one. And the Landback movement, to me, feels like a very crystallized call to reparations. To a different kind of reparations, perhaps, than what we've been talking about, but reparations nonetheless. So I want to read something to you from the Landback Manifesto. You can put it into your favorite search engine. This will bring up your result. And when we talk about land back, when we talk about reparations, that often brings up feelings of a little bit of discomfort in me. Of what does that require of me? What am I being asked to do? And if I'm being honest, it often takes the form of, what do I have to give up for this? So this is what the Landback Manifesto calls for. What is the Landback movement? The very first line, it is a relationship. It is a relationship with Mother Earth that is symbiotic and just, where we have reclaimed stewardship. The we here is Indigenous peoples. It is bringing our people with us as we move towards liberation and embodied sovereignty through an organizing political and narrative framework. It is a long legacy of warriors and leaders who sacrificed freedom and life. It is a catalyst for current generation organizers and centers the voices of those who represent our future. It is recognizing that our struggle is interconnected with the struggles of all oppressed peoples. It is a future where Black reparations and Indigenous land back coexist, where Black, Indigenous, people of color collective liberation is at the core. It is acknowledging that only when Mother Earth is well can we, her children, be well. It is our belonging to the land because we are the land. Let's sit with that for a second. I consider myself a good white person, or trying to be a good white person. And doing all the education work, reading all the books, going to the protests, trying to be in support and solidarity. And the wall that I've run into feels like face first. It was a paradigm that was offered to me by one of my Indigenous classmates in seminary. That we can make all kinds of excuses and reasonings for how directly connected we are to, for example, the slave trade in this country, especially if our families are recent immigrants to the country, for example. There's a lot of hemming and hawing that we can do. And what stopped me in my tracks was that she told me, she used the word settler. I was like, well, I don't really know what that means, but we'd also been together in Israel and Palestine, where the issue of settlements and settlers is very real. And I took a little bit of offense to that because I was thinking of that kind of settler. I was like, well, let's be fair here. I was like, well, either you are native or you are a settler, or you're someone who was brought here unwillingly. Oh, okay. Well, I was neither brought here nor unwillingly, nor was my family. And to my knowledge, is not native. Okay. Why do you get comfortable with that word settler? And that opened up the door to this whole mentality of the Landback movement. And for someone whose family quite literally were settlers of what they considered an unsettled land in Comancheria in the West Texas Panhandle, under the Homestead Act that encouraged white people to come and settle, started to see, oh, wow, that name really does apply. This paradigm actually does apply to my life. That is new information that is going to take me a second to digest and work through. And the guilt that came along with that was very easy to identify, right? It was like the first thing you notice. Ooh, that does not feel good. I do not like this. I would like to be rid of this feeling. What kind of baptism can I do to get rid of this guilt? What kind of confession can I do to get rid of this guilt? Because I do not like this. Anybody ever felt that way about anything else? You might be feeling this way right now if your family is like my family, part of the settler paradigm. And that's real. And that's something that I felt immediately in my conversations with my classmates, and have continued to feel on and off, depending on how much I engage with it. Because I consider myself a good white person, and I'm trying to do the right things. So when I hear the word land back, I think, well, that sounds like a very simple solution on one hand, right? Give the land back to the indigenous peoples. Okay, but how, when, why? What happens to the house that we just bought? What happens to the land that I consider home, that has been my family's home on Turtle Island for more than 150 years? How do I wrestle with all of that? And the resistance that comes up in my body, I can feel it. I can feel it right now. I can feel it right here. I can point to where it is, this guilt. And like, oh, I do not like this. So if you see me touching right here, that's what that is. So what do we do? It's important to sing songs and to learn and to hear and say, I'm going to stand in solidarity with people. To support the land back movement, to support reparations work, that's something we feel called to do as part of our faith principles, right? But what do we do with that reality? The idea of being on stolen land, that this beautiful building that I call home, that I'm sure many of us feel like is home. What do we do with that? For those of us who take pride in the upkeep of this building, we want it to look nice. We want it to be a symbol of all that is good. And what do we do if its very presence is a reminder of some kind of oppression? How do we wrestle with that? How do we stand in a way that is authentic, in a way that lives out our values, in a way that makes a difference, that is not just reading the land acknowledgement, which is an important first step, but it's something that goes beyond that? We spend a lot of time talking about what reparations look like through a Black American lens. And this is another call. And it might be too much for us. It might be. Look around. We're kind of a small congregation. We can't do everything. And we can't do it perfectly. So how do we find what we can do? How do we live into the principles to be allies of indigenous resistance against capitalism, land theft, colonialism, all those isms? What do we do? Here's what I found helpful. And here's what was offered to me. When I first experienced that guilt, Oh man, I don't like this. What could I do? Should I be paying rent to indigenous tribes? That's an option. What some congregations in this area are starting to do. It's what congregations in the Pacific Northwest do. It's a viable option. Would that make me feel better? Maybe, maybe not. Would that make a difference? Maybe, maybe not. But how is that a relationship? Is my question. And that was what was posed back to me. How do you want to be in relationship with the people who are from the land that you're on? And how do you want to be in relationship with the land itself? From the Landback Manifesto, the very first line, it is a relationship with Mother Earth that is symbiotic and just. So that's a question for us. How are you? How am I? How are we in relationship with Mother Earth? For some of us, that's a very spiritual connection that feels very intimate. For others of us, Earth is the place we happen to live. Maybe it's part of the great cosmos. But this is a very real and very pertinent question. What is our relationship with the earth and with everything that lives on it? When Mary and I were talking through this service, we love the idea that the Landback movement is both part of the 8th principle work of dismantling systems of oppression and a deep reminder of the 7th principle, the interdependent web of all existence. That even if the Delaware Nation now currently lives in Oklahoma, mostly, we're still neighbors. Like historically neighbors, perhaps spiritually neighbors, but we're still interconnected and interdependent. For those of you who know the history, there is a Church of the Restoration in Tulsa that's a little bit closer to this. Is that something that we ought to explore with our Unitarian Universalist congregations or with other people of liberal faith who live in Oklahoma? Working with the tribes themselves to find out, let them take the lead and say, what is required of us to be in relationship? Not just what do we have to give up, right? Because I don't think, as of now, that anybody is calling for the seizing of this congregation and turning it into some other thing. But the question is, how do we rethink our relationship with the first people and with the earth? So I really want us to wrestle with that, because it is very easy for this place to be somewhere you come on Sundays and then you go home. And that's meaningful, and that can be healing and helpful and spiritual. And there's nothing wrong with that. And what else are we feeling called to do if we have a sense of responsibility to the land? And I use that word responsibility intentionally, because that's the flip side of the guilt that I feel right here. And what my classmate said to me was, McKinley, you can feel that guilt all you want. It's not gonna do a thing for you. It is a useless emotion. It lets you know that something's up, but it does not lead to any transformation. It does not lead to anything. It is barren, like a fallow field. And the Landback movement is about restoring the land to be producing. So what am I called to do out of my responsibility to the land and my responsibility to be in relationship with the land? If I'm called to stand, it's hard to stand when you have so much guilt pressing right here. So when we talk about resistance, There's the indigenous-led resistance to all of the isms that we've talked about. And what I'm inviting us to do as settlers, if we identify like that, is to lean into that and to resist just feeling the guilt. It's a useless emotion. But that sense of faithfulness, that sense of love, that sense of responsibility that we have to one another, that we feel for one another, that we feel to the earth, perhaps, ooh, that's where change happens. That love with a capital L, that's where change happens. That's where relationship forms. That's where the seeds are planted that grow into the symbiotic and just relationship with Mother Earth. So friends, I'm going to invite you to resist the guilt trip. I'm talking to myself. And to open up to the idea of radical hospitality that we have talked so much about. Radical hospitality, not just to visitors who are coming through the door, but radical hospitality to our neighbors, historic and current, perhaps who live in Oklahoma, perhaps who have passed on and they're now spiritual ancestors and neighbors. What does radical hospitality look like for those of us here to one another? What does radical hospitality look like for our neighbors that live in this actual neighborhood, this physical neighborhood? And what are the ways that we could rethink this space, this land that is perhaps not owned by us, but merely stewarded? And how might we rethink the relationships to produce something new that gives back to the community? What kind of healing might happen if we tended to our garden, as Robin Wall Kimmerer speaks of? If we used acts of repair and restoration to make this land more of a communal resource rather than something that we feel like we own and have to protect? What would it look like for this to be a communal resource of food, perhaps? Maybe if we had a community fridge or something that you could come and visit, regardless of who you are. What would it look like to perhaps have some kind of community garden that allowed people to reconnect with the earth in very real, physical, tangible ways? Would that restore relationships? Would that build new relationships? Would that help repair some of the damage that has been done to Mother Earth? One of those easy ways to think about it is that the land used to be full of abundance and full of food. That the way that the stewards from where I'm from, of the Comanche people, the Lenape people, was almost always enough for all when it was tended properly. And how might we start to get back to that kind of identity, to work from a place of abundance and not scarcity, to not just worry about our little slice of beloved community, but to try and expand that out through the gifts of the land? That would look like healing, I think. So how do we participate in the Landback movement? Throw it in your search engine and you can find lots of ways. I don't have any easy answers. And I don't even know how possible it is for us to fully engage in this right now. But it's something we need to be aware of. Something I feel responsible for us to be aware of. And it's something born out of love for this congregation and for our neighborhood that I hope we can participate in however we find ourselves. I'm going to sing a song, and that's always dangerous. So I'm going to invite you to learn it and sing it with me. This is a song by Orion Johnstone. It's called Healing is Possible. First line goes like this. We believe what we need most. Can you sing that with me? We believe what we need most. Second line goes like this. Are the hearts of each other right here?
are the hearts of each other, right here. That's two lines. We believe what we need most are the hearts of each other, right here. There's a calm response. It goes like this. Healing is possible, may it be so. Healing is possible, may it be so. We believe what we need most are the hearts of each other, right here. We believe what we need most are the hearts of each other, right here. It's possible. Healing is possible, may it be so. Healing is possible, may it be so. Once more. We believe what we need most are the hearts of each other, right here.
Friends, I don't have any answers on how to fix all of the problems, but I invite us to lean into how we might be in solidarity with Indigenous resistance, how we might resist our own sense of guilt or inadequacy that is a useless emotion and is lying to you, telling you that there's nothing you can do about it. To find where we do fit in to the Landback movement, and to find that healing is possible and it might just be happening. May it be so. Let's take a breath. For our offering this morning, we have a video from the Sioux chef, Sean Sherman, one of the world-renowned food provisioners. He was born on a reservation here in America. Has gone on to found many indigenous food-based restaurants all across this country and the world. So as we pass the plate here in the sanctuary, I invite you to hear his words.